Welcome to Feminist Founders, a podcast that explores how to create a more equitable world through entrepreneurship with your hosts, Becky Mollenkamp and Faith Clarke. Hi, everyone. We've done it. We've talked to you all about the Feminist Founders framework, the different components of it, what it looks like when you integrate it, how it's different. And the last time we talked, we said we would be back to tell you about a program we're offering for folks who want to dive deeper, who want more individualized support in actually making this a reality for their businesses. So Faith and I were going to share a little bit about that today. But first, Faith, tell everyone hello and how you're doing. In the
Hey.
brief version of it.
I mean, is there a brief version? I can't be reductive. I am good. I'm happy to be offering this because it feels like the program I needed and need, and I think so much of what I've created for others has basically been, let me offer myself some support and then invite others along for the ride. And so this feels like this is what we're doing. Yeah.
Isn't it so true? It's what so many of us do, especially as service providers, I think. And you've talked about that, the medicine that you need. It's like, that's the medicine we offer is the medicine we need or needed. And so to be able to share that is great. And I'm excited about it too. It's the first time we've done something like this. And I think it's going to be very exciting. It's a big container that lasts a long time. So this is not a small thing. This is really for those people who want to be more fully immersed in this concept and have like real ongoing support, because we're talking about something that would run from May until October, and it'll be starting in a couple weeks. So we won't kick it off like tomorrow, but yeah, coming up very soon. And that's like a 6-month container of support. And I think that that's really valuable for people. Who do you think of, Faith, as the kind of people who would benefit most from being in this group container over these next months ahead?
Right. I think that those of us who've started businesses thinking there was a formula for success and that we could, if we did this, then that, then this, that the people told us, then we'd be able to have what we wanted. And then we've been disappointed by that idea. We're like, oh, there is no formula. And I think especially those of us who then have marginalized identities, not men, all of the major power identities, we've come to realize, oh, we would have to change ourselves to kind of live into those models. And that's part of why they don't work for us, and who kind of feel invited to create our own way in business and to be effective at it in ways that nourish people and that don't harm people. So it's like those people who are thinking about those things already, I think they're good candidates for that. And then any person, a service provider, small business, that's social impact, anybody who is committed to something that's post-capitalist, wanting to create this kind of new world, I think, would be, because I think what we're talking about is upending old systems. So people who've already begun to think about these old systems in my business, they're not aligned with my values.
Yeah, I think of it as people who know they want something different, but don't have a model for what that could be, right? Because I hear that a lot of times, and I'm sure you do too with your clients, where it's like, I know this doesn't work. And the problem is because they don't necessarily know what will work or have seen others modeling what works, because too often we turn for solutions. It's all these things that don't feel good. And then you start to think, well, then maybe the way I'm dreaming of can't work. Maybe there isn't another way. And then what I often find people saying to themselves is things like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should just go back and get a 9-to-5 if it's going to suck either way, right? Like maybe this isn't for me. And I think oftentimes that is not because it's very often what I find is the people who are saying those kinds of things don't actually want to go back and work for someone else. They don't want to go get a 9-to-5. They do want to make it work, but there's just so much fear about whether it's possible to do it in a way that's different, because continuing to do it in this really capitalist, corporate, icky way feels so bad that they don't want to do that, but they don't want to try to do it in a different way that would fail. And since there's often not a lot of great models, they don't know what to do. And so they just start to feel themselves like feeling like throwing up their hands in the air. And so when you talk about those people, that's often what I think of as that kind of person who's like throwing their hands up in the air saying, maybe I'm just not cut out for this after all.
I think also if the person is, is like me in any way, they've been to a bunch of masterminds or they've gotten a bunch of group coaching, they've done a bunch of stuff, right? And so now they're like, maybe that whole thing just doesn't work. Maybe I really am supposed to just figure it out on my own or whatever, right? And especially at the expense that some of us have gone through to get some of the support that we needed. And I think it's true that we need support. All humans need support. But what wasn't true or what wasn't good for us is that some of those groups were also built on old models. So the systems, they're trying to teach us how to do things in ways that harm people, but also the groups themselves in some cases felt harmful or didn't feel equitable and didn't feel inclusive, had power structures where you had to figure out how to be a certain way so that the leader would pay attention to you and things like that. And I think part of what we are committed to is not just the model that we're sharing with people, but also to being with people, to modeling the model, to being with the people in the group in ways that are truly focused on belonging and inclusion, and also that with a certain amount of vulnerability, we'll get it wrong and we'll figure it out together.
Yeah. And often those programs are real one size fits all, right? And we know that's not true. And it's because often it is this sage on the stage, as I've heard you say, these people who are showing up to say, I'm the expert, this very hierarchical approach. I'm at the top of this pyramid. You want to get to the top of this pyramid. So let me impart my wisdom onto you. You take that, wash, rinse, repeat, and you soon will be at the top of this pyramid, which I think most of us who are feeling this way inherently know that that's not right. It doesn't feel good. It's not what we want. And yet, because we're not really sure what we do want or what's going to work, we often fall into the like, well, they say they know, I guess I'll believe them. Other people say it's worked for them. I'll shell out the money and do it. And then at the end of it, we're left going like, I should have known better. I should have trusted my
I
instincts. I
knew
knew
it.
this wasn't going
I
to be
knew
right.
it.
Yeah, my
Right.
intuition told me this wasn't the right thing, but I just lost another 10 grand or whatever it is trying to get the magical wisdom. And I think both of us would say the truth is that doesn't work, because just because it worked for that person doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And what works better is a place where you have space to do the work to find answers for yourself, because you haven't gotten where you are without being incredibly smart, incredibly talented, right? Incredibly skilled, very capable. We know that you can do these things. It's often just that you haven't had a space where you have had the ability and the permission slip to show up and like honor that what you know to be true for you can work and is okay. And then having that support of other people saying like, yeah, go for it. Or have you kind of thought about this as you do that, and helping you sort of reshape those things. So when we talk about, because I think I heard you say like people are like, I've been in mastermind. I've spent money trying to solve this problem and none of it's worked. So if they hear us talking about a solution, I can hear them saying, and so I'm not spending money on this. It's just one more thing. Why? So for me, part of what I feel like makes a different is it's not that we're not here to say, here's our 10-step solution, go implement this and you'll get rich, right? That's not what this is. So Faith, when you hear people say like, I hear that in my mind, they're like, well, why should I do this then? I've already spent a $10,000, 10 different programs. I'm in the hole here. Why you? What would you say about what makes this different?
Well, two things come to mind. And the first one was what was running in my mind as you were talking is that the power of collective wisdom wins every day over single expert or single leader. And because we so honor collective wisdom just as a part of our value system, if we're going to return, we talked about decolonizing as a return to right relationship. Well, right relationship with each other, it's collective. That's how we've gotten where we want to go. So when we together co-create the solution for your business, it's just so much more robust than when you by yourself in a corner or when you're in a mastermind, So I think co-creating in the collective, I think is going to be really brilliant. I think also we're really centering what we've called the Feminist Founders values. And that means that we are really centering human well-being And so you don't have to now listen to what we're saying and then filter it through this lens of, well, how do I do this in a way that doesn't harm people or whatever? We're really centering a certain kind of intersectionality. We're really centering power sharing. And so when those things we're centering, discomfort is okay. In fact, discomfort is wonderful. And we're going to figure out how to navigate it versus avoid it. We are decentering perfectionism and power over. So I think that makes it different because we're going to be holding those ideals up and then saying what a lot of people don't say. Okay, so what does this mean for this sales page? What does this mean for this spreadsheet, payroll, for the onboarding of the VA? What does it mean? And we're here for, we're going to integrate all that and make it work with you.
Yeah. And that for you, right? Your specific custom situation. And there are things that are fairly universal that a lot of us deal with. And yet I have found for myself, and maybe you found this true too, where I get into a program, whether it's a course that everyone's taking, and so there's no one there, or even when I've been in places where there's a coach who's trying to offer a quote unquote coach, usually they're more like strategists than coaching, but when they've tried to show up and give me the solution that's going to work, often will struggle with, but wait a minute, how does it apply to my business? Because we all sort of feel like special unicorns in our own way. We are sort of special unicorns. And while there are things that are fairly universal, still everything about your business is unique to you and the way you show up in the world, the way you want things to be, what feels right for you, because no two people are the same. And I think that's often what's lacking in a lot of those group programs is that piece of, we want to figure it out for you. And that's why this container is here, because I think both of us probably believe that most people, because again, we believe you're all capable, intelligent, and incredible humans, you could figure a lot of this out for yourself, right? I think you could listen to our past episodes about this framework, do some reading. I think you could, right? But the question is really why, then what's keeping you from it? And often it is some of those things around the fear of, but I'm not sure how to apply it to my business, or the internal permission slip to do that, or the ongoing support when it gets challenging and you start to doubt yourself. And I think to me, that's what a lot of this is about, is it's a space where you get to be amongst others who are committed to the same sorts of things, but also in a place that's fluid enough for you to be able to get really custom about what does it mean for me? I heard you talking about this, but wait a minute, what about this situation that I have? And that's the piece that I think very often is lacking.
Yeah, and I think, many of us start by building businesses that don't include us. Like we're building this general idea, this business, but fundamentally, inclusion starts here in this body. And so what does it mean to build something that includes me? And then what does it mean to build something that includes others? Those are such new skills for so many of us. And I think what happens together is that we kind of create energy and buffer each other's wings as we answer questions that are hard because people aren't answering those along with and make money. Yeah, the rent does still need to be paid. The kids do still need to have shoes, or whatever. So this is not about sacrifice yourself and sacrifice money. There is a new way to create something so that there's a win-win.
Yeah. We haven't talked about this. And so I just hope people know, like, we're having this conversation is very organic. We haven't talked about what we're going to talk about here. I like the way things just tend to flow, even though technically this is a sales conversation. We haven't mapped it out or anything. And so what I'm about to ask you, you're not going to have a pat answer for because we haven't talked about it, but I am curious to hear what you think. And I'm happy to share what I think too. But when you think about people going through this program with us, and again, that's with us because we're going to be in it with you, not, it's not
We're
about
going to
us.
be taking our businesses through it too, as we.
And including this business, Feminist Founders, and applying these things and seeing how it changes. But so as we think about being in space with these folks, how do you want people to feel at the end of it? Like, what shift do you hope that they experience? And we can also say for the same for ourselves, because as we said, we'll be in it as well.
Yeah, I the first thought that just popped into my mind, which is an image really, is that feeling of I actually did this big thing that I'd been avoiding or that I thought I couldn't do. So that sense of, wow, I did do that, whatever that is. I think that each person will come upon a barrier to their own implementation in their business, that when we support each other through it, we're going to get on the other side. And then they'll be like, my goodness, I did that. my goodness, we did that together. So that's one of the first things. And I think that just running right alongside that is they did that, and I can see how I feel better. I benefit in my physical body. Yeah, my bottom line benefits, but my physical body benefits, my relationships benefit, and my ability to kind of include people in my business in the future, whether that's hiring or whatever. I see how this is benefiting that too. So there's a way that the wishes become reality, become something that they can see how it would work, and the relief that that kind of brings. And then I think the last thing is the feeling of like squad, tribe, community. That was like, wow, I found a bunch of, I recognize you. You are my people. We can, outside of this container, continue this conversation and support each other in making this happen. So the feeling of themselves belonging. Solopreneurs and small business owners are notoriously lonely because we are providing, creating, and providing for others. So just the feeling of like, oh, a place where I fit.
Yeah. I love that. And fairly similarly, I hope that we feel the same way I often feel, or my clients feel when we work together, which is at the end of this time, it's not so much that there's this monumental shift or anything like where there was nothing. Often people will be like, there wasn't anything here I didn't already know, but I did it and it felt good. And I'm leaving here feeling like, with that reminder that I can trust myself, that I can take action and I can make things happen. Because again, I just fully believe there's not going to be anything that you're going to say, I have never thought of that before. Or maybe there will, but most of it's going to be like, this is all stuff I've thought about. I've just either lacked the confidence in myself or the community support to be able to feel secure in doing it. And so my hope is that people leave feeling with like just having this much deeper sense of self-trust. Like I can trust myself. I do have the right answers. I can take these actions. And I love what you said about the community, because that to me is a big part of what allows us to be able to take scary action, is knowing that we have a community behind us that are going to be there cheering us on, catching us when we start to feel like we're going to fall, right? To be there to be that support network. So those, I think for me, are the biggest things. It's like just leaving with a real sense of self-trust, spaciousness. That's another big part of it, because I think this kind of work inherently ends up leading to feeling more spacious in your body, your time, your business, and then that community piece. So I love that. I'm glad I
Yeah, and I
asked.
think this piece about the, you know, being able to figure out the how that's specific to you, the how that will work with the values that you want to integrate. So many of us feel shame even in asking those questions the way we need to ask them to get the help we need. Cause you're like, wait, but, you know, just like you said, how does my kid wakes up I'm up until 3 a.m. So when am I creating this content?
Mhm.
And just to be in a place where it's safe to ask the questions as often as and the way you need, and to have people like us who will even probe you. You sure you don't have any more questions? And what about this and this thing you told us? What about that? And how's it work here? It's to build those muscles in kind of working through that how together. That feels like really powerful.
Yeah, having a standing place that you can turn to, because it's one thing to take in the information or to, develop the plan. But I think so many of us know that the real challenge comes in the ongoing sustained execution of a plan, because anyone can hand you a plan and you can say, okay, yep, I know what I'm doing. I know how to get from A to Z. I got the steps. I'm ready to go. And that place always feels really good, I think, for a lot of us, where we're like, okay, we got a plan in place. We're ready to start taking action. And then what we often find is the actual either starting can be hard. So having support in that is great. But for a lot of people, what gets hard is the sustaining of it when it gets challenging, the
Yeah.
discomfort piece that we've
Yeah.
talked about. When the discomfort starts to come up, for a lot of us, we go into like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And for a lot of us, it's like that either we freeze, we get stuck, we're not doing anything, or even flight, where we start to say, nope, shutting it down, wasn't worth it. This plan's no good. And what we really need is to have the support for us to be able to face the fear and to face the discomfort and work through that on a sustained way. And that is where that standing call, that standing group of people you can turn to, that you're checking in with, that are going to be asking you questions, but from a place of a lot of love and care, that are also doing that same thing, right? That you get to lend support. Because I think there's just so much also that isn't talked about often. We think a lot about the taking of support in these spaces, but I think there's so much that happens from the giving of support. It makes you show up in a new way, because when you're supporting others, you want to be able to show up and say, I did it and this is what it looked like for me. And that feels really good. So I think that also motivates us into action. So I just think that having a standing container, I don't think you can underestimate how valuable that can be when the people inside that container are the kinds of people you want to be in the battle with.
Yep, yep, yep. And I think just the fact that we're going to constantly be reminding people on how to nourish, about how to nourish themselves and their vision through practices that, first of all, start again with self-nourishment, leadership nourishment, vision nourishment. That, like, the word that comes to mind is juicy. That's so juicy. And it's so not in our typical business landscape, right? And so this idea that we are exhausted from trying to just keep our businesses afloat. And therefore, our businesses become places where the people who join us are also exhausted. And so just our kind of focus on nourishment and building practices that do that becomes a win-win, certainly in terms of sustainability for the leader and then for the business itself.
You can't sustain it if you've burned yourself out, right? That's just, it doesn't work. And so there would, having that continuous, again, the check-in, not just on progress, but also on how you're feeling as you progress, because that's so important and often gets overlooked in a lot of these kinds of programs. So I love that you mentioned that. I think we've talked a lot now about who the program's for, what kind of makes this program different, how you'll feel at the end of the program. I'm thinking the other thing people are probably asking, that I would probably be asking, is like, but what is it? Like, what does this mean? Like, what am I if I sign up, what am I signing up for? And so again, it's May, June, July, August, September, October, 6 months, just making sure, May to October, 6 months. It's a 6-month container where Faith and I will be there with you, and hopefully, a cohort of folks working through the same thing, with standing calls to be able to talk about the framework, right? But not just talk about the framework, but the application of the framework. What does that look like to your business? And again, that framework includes starting with your vision for your business and your life, and the vision we're trying to co-create together as a group, as a collective, and then talking about what role self-leadership and leadership of others plays in that, talking about culture. How do you create the culture you want inside your business? What does that look like? And then systems, the systems that you're using, the tools, the resources, the systems that are in place to actually make all of that happen. And then, of course, throughout all of that is that piece around dealing with discomfort, disruption, the difficulties that come up. And so we'll be having those conversations. But also, I think, Faith, a big part of it is there isn't necessarily a prescriptive syllabus that we're going to hand you and say, here's the curriculum for these 6 months. On this call, we'll do this call, we'll do this, because that doesn't really fit into this model, right?
And what's likely to happen is that, because in our intake, we're going to get information about all of the businesses that are a part of that will be part of the cohort, and the particular pain points and particular desires and the questions that feel salient to the group. And so part of our design is to then use our framework, but to really zone in on what people's actual needs are, and then elevate those things through the lens of the framework. So yeah, vision, we'll talk about all of that. And then also to help a particular business with where the lack of vision or the misaligned vision is actually showing a pain problem, an issue, and then designing the solutions for that. So very hands-on. And I think, and I don't know about you, Becky, but I enjoy when people feel comfortable using hot seats just as a way to give the opportunities for one-to-one attention while other people get to benefit, because as you said, we're all dealing with the same thing. And in addition to the teaching or the giving of content, there will be this time where together the group, because a hot seat for me isn't just a time where I talk and the person listens or I question, but it's an opportunity for the whole community to link arms and then say, hey, we're pouring all our loving attention and we're going to give you all the wisdom that we have that's coming through at this moment, and then design based on that person's actual answers. So that's both content and this kind of arm's length time.
Yeah. an application to your specific business. And yeah, I like to call them love seats only because hot seat sounds like it's, like you're sweating. Nobody wants that. So it's a love seat. We're all pouring our love into you. And I think I think throughout this, in fact, not just in that sort of form, but in all the way, I hope that it is a linking of arms and a collective effort of helping each other through these things. And Faith and I being there to be the people who are just doing that little bit of check-in of, wait a minute, let's just make sure that we're the advice we're giving or the questions we're asking or the thoughts that we're having here, are we making sure we're bringing them through this lens that we're all wanting to, right? And we're just serving as those sort of curators or guides to make sure that what's happening inside this container remains aligned with the vision that we have for what it means to really bring this kind of approach to our businesses. Because, we have to do that with each other. We all have to do that because we all live and exist inside these systems. And it's easy, no matter how dedicated you are, to still have things kind of get brought in that you think, oh my gosh, I didn't even, until someone else shined that light on it, I didn't even see the ways that this was perpetuating some of this toxicity. And so, we want to be able to do that for each other, but also have folks do that with us and really have it be a true collective experience that most of us don't get. And so I hope that people will give themselves that gift of being able to be inside a space that is going to be very different than much of what we've all had the chance to experience.
Yeah, I think it feels like I have a client who says that her business is to create liberation. This is a teaching their after school program and so on. But I just loved the language of liberation. It feels highfalutin. And yet I also think that's what we're all doing. And this container will be a container that's focused on all our liberations and the liberation of our business. And to be able then to kind of do that and see the ripple effect of it and begin or continue that process of infusing liberation into some of the tight areas that we didn't know how to free or weren't sure what to do or didn't have, like you said, the permission. So I'm looking forward to this infusion of liberation for myself, because the more I offer it, the more I receive it. And for everybody else, because the more of us that are focused on that, the more the revolution will need to be grassroots. It will need to be us, this one and this one and this one and this one. And so staying steady in the small things is the only path to liberation. That I know about that we can sustain.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited too. And I'm excited to do this with you. I'm excited for anyone who joins us on this journey. If you're interested, you can learn more in the show notes. There's a link to the sales page where you can get more information about pricing, about timing, about signing up, and hopefully get your questions answered. But if you have questions that aren't being answered through that, or if there's more information you need to make a decision, you can always reach out to either of us. You can get me at Becky at BeckyMollenkamp.com. Faith, would it be okay if they email you if they have questions?
Absolutely. Faith at faithclarke.com.
Boy, we
Yeah.
really
And I
keep
think,
with our email addresses. That's just first name at full name.
yeah, it's just straightforward. And I think also if they reach out to, is it Feminist Founders at Gmail?
I think so. That's why I didn't use it, because I couldn't remember for sure which one it was. But I think that's right. I think it's Feminist Founders
I'll put
at
this in the show notes.
You're right. I'll put it in the show notes for sure. No, it's Feminist Founder at gmail.com. There's no
There we
S.
go.
Because I think the other was taken. So yeah, I will put that in the show notes as well. So you can email either of us or there, and neither of us will make sure that we get it. But hopefully most of your questions will be answered on the sales page. It's just an application process. So if it feels like a good fit for you, then you can apply, and we'll ask, like you mentioned, some of the intake kind of questions there too, just to make sure that it feels like a good fit on both sides for you to be a part of this container. And we would love to welcome you in. And we're really excited to get started with this. And I know summer can be a time when it can be, for some folks, can feel challenging to spend time in a program like this or thinking about their business. And I totally understand for some people that may not work, but I also just want to encourage you that it can also be a quieter time in many of our businesses because there are so many people who are traveling, kids are off in the summer and all of that. So if you're able to dedicate some time to yourself in the summer, to your business, to what you care about, for many people, it can actually be a really exceptional time to do that because it is a little slower in the business. There is a little more spaciousness to give yourself this gift of asking some of these questions and exploring these things and making changes that I find can often be difficult to do at the new year or at the end of the year when things tend to get a little more busy and hectic. So obviously weigh it out with your own personal life situation and what you have going on. But I think the summer, honestly, is often a really, really good time to invest in something like this for yourself and your business, because you have very often that spaciousness to give yourself permission to sort of say, when I'm busy, I don't feel like I have time to work on my business. I'm just busy in it. And the summer can be a really beautiful time to say, you know what, I'm going to give myself this gift this summer to actually work on my business. So I hope
I
you'll
think
join.
also the beauty of a small container too, with the values that we have, is that we also are designing to fit the actual humans that show up in the container. So if, we're flexible enough to say, oh, everybody is off to wherever this week when we had planned a session, we'll move it to so I think that if you're interested, come in and then we'll dialogue on what some of the detailed tweaks may need to be that's reflective of serving the actual people who want to be in this container with us.
Yeah. And speaking of that, because I think one of those things that people always ask whenever they want to sign up for something, when are the calls? When are the calls? Because nobody wants to miss anything. They want to make sure it works. And there's a reason why that information isn't on the sales page. And it's for that very reason. We don't know when the calls are yet. We're going to figure that out once we know when everyone in the container, who's going to be in this container, so that we can work together to figure out what works for all of us. That's what it looks like to do some of this work in action, is to look collectively and say, how do we as a community come up with something that works for all of us, instead of it being what is the normal approach, which is, I have dictated, this is what works for me. Now you shall all show up when I'm available. And instead we're saying, we're going to collectively work to figure this out. So if that's one of your questions, there's your answer. We don't yet know when the calls are. You will help us decide that.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Anything else, Faith, that you want to share before we say goodbye to everyone from this special series that we've done? We'll be back on the podcast soon. We're not sure yet when, but we will be back again with more. But anything else to wrap up what we've talked about with the framework or with this container?
No, I feel pretty content. I'm excited to be, healing all our hearts, helping our businesses to be part of our own healing, in this time.
Yeah, me too. I mean, honestly, it feels like such a gift in a time when I think so many of us are feeling that overwhelm of like, how do I business right now? And to be able
How do
to
I
business. Exactly. And to be able to do that in a collective of other people who are feeling the same way, and to get that support in tackling some of those questions as well in this kind of space, I think is just such a beautiful gift. So I'm excited to be able to offer it and do it with you and everyone else. And we'll be back in your ears at some point soon. And until then, we hope you'll join us, and everything's in the show notes that you need all your questions answered. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Faith, for doing this with me.
You're welcome, Becky.
Thanks for listening to Feminist Founders Podcast. If you'd like to learn more or support our work, please visit feministfounders.co. The link is in the show notes. There you can become a paid supporter for as little as the price of a cup of coffee. Thanks again, and we can't wait to welcome you back for our next episode.